But no, speaking of New York courts getting it right again, Project Veritas. This was a sort of complicated, but not really. They're suing. This was in the Twitter lawsuit, Twitter defamation. Twitter, I didn't cover this motion to change jurisdiction or change venue. Twitter moved this from the New York State court to the federal court, and I think it was California, if I'm not mistaken, well, Robert.
Initially, it always has to be in New York, but the likely objective was, once it was removed, to then make a motion to transfer venue to the Northern District of California.
Okay. So the motion itself was to move from state court to federal court. And Twitter's argument, which is, I mean, it's so preposterous because there's the $75,000 threshold on a claim, from what I understand. So under $75,000, you can stay in state court. Over $75,000, you got to go to federal court.
Well, you don't have to, but it gives federal court authority.
Okay. So Veritas is not claiming over $75,000. And Twitter's argument was that basically, we're not convinced that if Project Veritas succeeds on its claim, then the damages, given the fact that we make $309, I don't know how much they make, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Well, the damages will likely be more than $75,000. So therefore, we should be transferred venue from state to federal, or transfer jurisdiction from state to federal, and then maybe venue after that. And that was basically Twitter's argument, is that we think this, ultimately, if Veritas succeeds, we'll suffer more than $75,000 in damages, even though Veritas is not claiming that amount, because this might be a question of principle and not a question of monetary damages or a retraction. I don't know how you quantify that monetarily. It might be worth more than $1 million. So they get shut down. It's going to stay in New York State, and New York State thus far has been relatively favorable to Project Veritas's claims. I'm not saying to Veritas itself, but they seem to be upholding the law. What do you think of the decision? And what is the state of the law actually on this type of claim? Because it sounds like a far-fetched motion to transfer in the first place.
Yeah, so they basically, Project Veritas's lawyers did the exact same thing I did in the Covington cases. So when I sued in state court, and I sued for $50,000, the cost of a University of Kentucky 4-year tuition, again, as our claim for damages for each plaintiff against each defendant. And what that meant was, even though these defendants were out of state, there was no jurisdiction for the federal court to remove the action. They still tried and lost. And it's the same. Basically, you as a plaintiff have control over how much money you sue for. And so sometimes under federal law, this is how Senator Warren and Deb Haaland, now Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, got the case removed. They argued that the issue arose under federal congressional immunity, but the other defendants were unsuccessful because the only grounds for them to remove it is they had to say there was a dispute between parties of different states, that the plaintiffs and defendants were from totally different states, and that the amount of money involved was at least $75,000 in dispute. Because the amount that I alleged was under $75,000, the way some defendants try to get around that is they claim, well, you're really wanting $75,000. And typically, as a plaintiff, if you limit yourself to that amount, to less than $75,000, you're bound by that later on throughout the proceedings. They can't try to impose upon you an obligation to sue for an amount you don't want. What it is Twitter is seeing the good reactions Project Veritas is getting in that particular county, and didn't like it, and they ran to federal court. Now, the interesting thing about federal court removal is the federal judge gets to decide whether the removal applies. I mean, really, I think some of these times it should be a state judge decision, but that ship has sailed. And so the federal judge was like, no, this is just an obvious effort by Twitter to drag it out of here. And secondly, there's another example where Twitter wanted to pretend that all of its anything involving them has to be sued in Northern District of California. This argument was being made about Trump's suit. It's only because of how Trump brought it that is likely to be successful for Twitter and YouTube and Facebook in that context. But here, he was again, when you're being sued for defamation, Section 230 is no immunity, and those terms of service deals don't apply. So that's why. So it was another important precedent-setting win by Project Veritas, and continuous fantastic work by James O'Keefe.
And now I forget where it was, but someone, I think it might have been in the comment section of his video, says, we don't care about these small W's, we want the big W. I don't think people appreciate
small W's matter as much as you never get to a big W unless you get these small W's.
And people should appreciate one of the biggest W's that anyone can get and hope for right now is discovery, is unfettered discovery. And because if you get there, you're going to either find out that there is no cause of action or how bad and how deep it actually runs. So $10 million is nice. Money, money is a tool. It's not an end. The discovery here itself might be something of an end in and of itself, because it might be the beginning of a new beginning, depending on what it reveals.
And he's made clear he's bringing these suits for the right reasons. He's not looking for money. He's entirely looking, and he's not even just looking for retractions, corrections, and apologies. He's looking to find out the truth and to expose that truth to the rest of the world while setting legal precedents that other people can follow, sort of like Lewis and Clark, sort of blaze the legal path that other people can follow in his footsteps to also achieve justice and some balance in the court of public opinion from these institutional sources of big tech and big media power.
I brought this set up. Please don't get up. I take for granted this is comedy because, dude, okay. So that's, I mean, the next step in this is it's going to continue in the state court of New York, which is thus far, it's been very productive for Veritas, and it's amazing. It's great to see. It is high time. Look, Veritas filed the suit the way it should be filed against Twitter, and you compare that, and I'm not criticizing for the sake of criticizing. I'm criticizing because I want positive results. You compare that to other suits that we just discussed. It's a light and day in terms of how they're being waged, the allegations that are being included, and the strategy being adopted. So we'll see where it goes. And, we'll do a follow-up with James O'Keefe one of these days, because that was a phenomenal stream that we had with him last time. And when there's news, we'll do it.